No big, I feel like Pac. I shoot a shot. I'm coming in hot.
On June 6th, at around 9 a.m. in the morning, masked men in unmarked cars showed up to various places around Los Angeles and began detaining people.
Chaos erupts as armed federal agents conduct sweeping immigration raids across Los Angeles.
Reports of multiple people detained outside of a Home Depot.
Dramatic video in Santa Fe Springs shows armed ICE agents dressed in tactical gear swarming this swap meet.
It was ICE, as well as the DHS and the FBI. Over 45 arrests were made. The detainees were loaded into prison vans and taken to the detention center in downtown Los Angeles. As word got out, people showed up by the hundreds to protest and to block the entry and exit of prison vans and DHS and ICE from the detention center garage.
The surprise raids took place this morning, but the chaos continues into the night as hundreds face off with police.
Tear gas, flashbangs, angry crowds, and heavily armed and armored U.S. immigration and customs enforcement agents marked a volatile Friday in the heart of Los Angeles during a series of immigration sweeps. Back up! Don't push her that way.
Police began using pepper balls, tear gas, and flashbangs to disperse the crowd. 27 people were arrested. Over the next week, tensions rose. On June 7th, protests popped up in Paramount and Compton. Over 100 people were arrested across Los Angeles, and Trump federalized the California National Guard, over 2,000 soldiers, despite Gavin Newsom's objections.
Section 12406, clearly there's no invasion, there's no rebellion. It's absurd.
On June 8th, the National Guard arrived. There were mass protests and freeway blockades. I'm going to show you my POV of that day. And I know I put a warning at the beginning, but please be aware that there's going to be a lot of graphic images, including places burning down, police beating people, people being shot with less lethal munitions, bloodied protesters. There's a lot, and it's graphic, so please keep that in mind. We arrived downtown at about 2 p.m. We were planning to go to City Hall, but a huge parade of people had already started moving from City Hall to the detention center on Temple and Alameda. We joined with them, and it was amazing. It was great vibes. There were signs, there was a man on stilts, there was music, there was flags, there was chants, there was people stopping and honking. It just felt like a normal protest, a normal parade of people. But once we got around the corner at Alameda Street at the detention center, that's where things took a turn. There was National Guard stationed in front of the detention center garage where things had happened on the 6th. At that point, nobody threw anything. There were claims that rocks and bottles and concrete were thrown, but there was nothing. I didn't see anything at all, and honestly, it was shocking how quickly it turned. The protests reached the National Guard, and next thing we know, flashbang grenades and tear gas are being deployed. It was chaos. A lot of people clearly were not expecting this, and it was scary, which I understand. It's scary when you just go there to protest and you're with a group of people and you're just in everyday clothes, and next thing you know, your eyes are burning and your ears are ringing and you don't really know what's going on. The police en masse started pushing us back towards Temple Street, towards the intersection. Once they reached the intersection, everything kind of sat for a little bit. People chanted, people called out what they wanted the police to hear, which is a lot of, "We're people. Look what you're doing to people." There were children in the crowd, women, old people, people in wheelchairs. They didn't care. There was a couple times where people pushed forward, but nothing super aggressive. They even were shooting at and pushing anybody with a camera, but people still protested peacefully. There were hot dog carts and music playing and cheering and all kinds of things going on. There was dancing. We were walking around at the time handing out water bottles and masks and anything people might need because we wanted to help. When I posted about this online, there were people who were saying, "Oh, the second you leave that cart alone, it's gonna get raided." But in actuality, as we went through the day, people just began pouring supplies into the cart for other people. They gave us N95 masks, gas masks, water, food, even things like flags and signs and anything we could have needed. They just filled it up for anyone to take, and people were so grateful for everything that they got, especially water. After a while, things started to move down Temple Street to the intersection of Temple and Los Angeles. This spot's right outside City Hall, right outside the detention center, and it is a big spot where a lot of things go on through the following week. But on this day, I wasn't really sure what to expect. The police moved up into the intersection, splitting people up into 4 separate groups of protesters. On one side, they put up a blockade of orange construction worker signs, and on the other side, they started burning Waymos.
Waymo is steering clear of downtown LA until further notice after 5 of its driverless cars were destroyed during the ICE protests.
You can see one individual breaking windows. There's that other Waymo that's on fire.
The Waymo burning is controversial. Some people agree with it, some people don't. Some people have very strong feelings, which I understand. But the actuality is that it was a small group of people. Fox News and all the other news sources latched onto that for days and days and days after. There were days and days of peaceful protests where things like that didn't happen, where things didn't burn, where things didn't catch fire, where there wasn't all these horrible things going on, but it didn't matter because they had those 4 clips. So despite everything else that was happening, including this one officer who seemed jazzed up and ready to go from the start, who runs forward and shoots a protester in the stomach that was doing nothing. And let me tell you, these less lethal munitions, they fucking hurt. They will fuck you up, especially at close distance. And yet still, the people in my group were dancing and singing and chanting, and nobody was hurt aside from the people that the police targeted. As we were pushed backwards along Los Angeles Street, protesters grabbed a chain link fence and pulled it across the street as a blockade, which the police immediately began firing into. It was at this moment someone pointed out that the cops were all over on the roofs. And they had snipers. This is the point in the day where I realized I was not prepared for what was happening. I was in regular clothes. I didn't even have a mask. I was not ready for what was going on, and I ended up leaving. More arrests were made that night. People were hurt. And during all this, Gavin Newsom was suing Donald Trump for unlawful deployment of the California National Guard.
Local law enforcement had no needs. They were not requesting any additional resources, but they didn't need that support. He made this up. This is a manufactured crisis.
Newsom today announcing the state is suing the administration, alleging it illegally deployed the troops. Not since the civil rights movement in 1965 has a president bypassed a sitting governor's call for using the National Guard.
On June 9th, Trump deployed over 700 Marines.
President Donald Trump is ordering hundreds of Marines into Los Angeles.
Tonight, active duty U.S. Marines officially in LA.
And protests continued across the state and began popping up in other places as well. But every single protest is always declared an unlawful assembly. Doesn't matter why, doesn't matter when, doesn't matter where. They will declare it that way so that they can attack with impunity. On June 10th, I was ready to come back, and I was more prepared this time, and I was planning specifically to film what happened while I was downtown. I was actually downtown with Dead Domain, who is another YouTuber on here and streamer. They streamed the entire thing, and they do have a doc coming out, so make sure to check out their channel as well. On June 10th, an 8 p.m. curfew was enacted, and protests popped up in Seattle, Oakland, Washington, D.C. People were noticing and people were saying something. At this point, over 150 arrests had been made in Los Angeles tied to these protests. Dead Domain and I arrived downtown at 4 p.m. on June 10th. At this point, the news was saying that Los Angeles is burning down. We need the National Guard. We need the Marines. It's a giant insurrection. But we spent the first 2 hours of our time downtown looking for the protest, encountering other people looking for the protest. There was graffiti, there was boarded up windows, but honestly, that's kind of normal for Los Angeles. And we couldn't find the protest anywhere. This giant insurrection taking over the entire city was nowhere to be found. Eventually, we came to a group in a park. There were speakers who were sharing their stories and their struggles and what was happening, and it was run by religious leaders in the community, and it was beautiful.
So we must, through our actions, through speaking up for our brothers and sisters.
When I was a little girl, my grandfather taught me the story of my ancestors in the Sikh tradition, how they overcame authoritarian regimes that tried to annihilate them. They became Sant Sipahi, sage warriors.
Bueno, my name is Pastor Carlos Rincon from Centro de Vida Victoriosa. and I'm going to do my presentation in Spanish.
When they grabbed the folks, my heart began to beat very deeply and my knees began to shake.
Porque se empezaron a bajar dos jovencitas, la esposa de uno de ellos, y bajó una bebita como de un mes.
It was two young women and a baby of about a month old.
Al ver yo eso, yo dije, pueden ser mis hijas, pueden ser mis nietas.
And I thought those could be my children, those could be my nieces.
This is the right place, and it is the right time.
Do you believe families are sacred? Si creen ustedes que las familias son sagradas, levanta la mano. Raise your hand.
So you can show up for the march, but if you don't stay prayed up, you're not going to last in this fight. Whatever it is for you, whether it's prayer, meditation, being with friends and family, cooking, riding your bicicleta like I do.
And near the end of it, they let us know that they were planning to march down to the detention center to show support for the detainees.
So in a moment, this beautiful rally will officially end. And for those who would like to, we have seen in the last few days since Friday that a presence of faithful witness has been so important outside the detention center. For folks to know that they are not alone, for us to respond to what the family said about don't just come in good times, come all the time. So for those who would like to, of your own free will and of no obligation, we are going to walk down to the detention center. We do not know what is going to be there, what will be unfolding, but we come in peace and in nonviolence.
We lit candles and we joined the march, and as we were marching down to City Hall, down to the detention center, more and more groups of people joined us from all over the city in every direction, and this giant crowd grew. Well, the police and the Marines and the National Guard lurked on every corner. We made it down to City Hall, we made it down to the entrance of the highway, and there were more police there than I think I've ever seen in my life. I was honestly blown away by the amount of police there. I know these videos aren't going to do it justice, but the overwhelming, crushing, obvious presence of these huge groups of officers in tactical gear and police cars lined up on every bridge and 5 helicopters flying around in the sky, it was oppressive and terrifying. But we kept marching. We reached a point where we stopped. The police wouldn't let us go any further. The only instance of violence towards the police that I recorded that day was a firework thrown into the police line, which the police moved away from. No one was hurt. And immediately after that, a pastor stood between police and the protesters. The pastor that had just led the march down there and had been leading the demonstrations at the park, and he held his hands up between us and he told us, peaceful protest. We are peacefully protesting. We are not here for violence. And I'm not going to be one to police and dictate how someone wants to protest. That's not what I'm here for. I'm here to show that the narrative that the news was pushing was not accurate. The minutes ticked down until curfew, and the tension rose so dramatically. People began to break off, but still hundreds of people were left over. After a bit, police began advancing and pushed us back towards that bridge on Los Angeles and Temple. And this is where things stayed for a while. And again, it was peaceful. I recorded so much footage, and I didn't get anything of police being hit by any projectiles, of anyone throwing anything. There was music playing, and yes, people had on gas masks and helmets because they were prepared. They knew how this would probably go because the police always find a way to be as aggressive as possible. There were people on motorcycles driving around, there were people holding up their signs, and as things got later and an unlawful assembly was called yet again and it was past curfew, the beam of a police helicopter shined down on all of us, and that's when I knew things were going to get intense. People started to realize that there were cops up in the edges around the street, hidden in the shadows. Around that time is when more police came in, more horses, and prison buses. At this point, police rushed the crowd, and we took off running. It was incredibly hard to get out of the city that night, trying to find a way where we wouldn't run into a line of police, and I wasn't even aware yet that it was gonna be worse next time I was down there. We finally made it back to our car and out of the city, and my body was vibrating, and I didn't even know why that had happened. There was no violence, there was no fire, there was nothing thrown. They were just there, and the police couldn't allow that. I had people message me on social media that night saying that they had friends in the area and they hadn't heard back from them since the police started arresting, and I couldn't help them because I didn't know what to do aside from giving them the contact information for where they could be detained. But it got worse. The next few days, my body was so incredibly sore that I could not go down and do that again. I had to recover. But on June 11th, ICE began raiding farms.
Scenes like this going viral. Farm workers in Ventura County being arrested by ICE agents while they're picking the country's food. Here's another viral clip, this one from Oxnard, sparking outrage. Farm workers telling Fox 11 they are terrified to go to work.
Now they're chasing us like we are animals. I see my colleagues in videos being chased. We're not criminals. We just came to give our children a better future. I would say they should chase the real criminals and leave us alone to work in peace.
They were doing this everywhere, all over the city, and there were instances of people who were not affiliated with ICE showing up in exactly the same outfits, claiming to be ICE, and then robbing and assaulting people.
I have asked for IDs. Can you please tell me that you refuse to give us your IDs?
We don't need to give you IDs.
You don't need to give us
federal.
IDs.
We do not need to give you IDs.
So how do we know you're federal?
Showing what witnesses say was an ICE raid in Compton in which officers arrested 5 to 7 people. I have to say, witnesses say it was an ICE raid because even more than a week later than when that happened, no federal agency has confirmed that the people in that video were theirs. And this is not isolated. I mean, all across the country, immigrants are being arrested by federal immigration agents who provide little to no identification and who are frequently masked. Unfortunately, we don't even have to speculate about the dangers of that practice. We know them. In late January, a man in North Carolina was arrested for allegedly pretending to be an ICE officer to sexually assault a woman.
An El Dorado Hills man finds himself behind bars tonight after he was detaining unsuspecting construction workers. Armed with a gun and a badge, he impersonated an ICE agent, taking victims' money.
Also at this point, on June 11th, over 4,000 military personnel were deployed into Los Angeles. This is more than in most active war zones. Like, this is an unprecedented amount of people for, again, a protest that it took us hours to even find in the heart of downtown. People protested again that night, and more arrests were made. By June 12th, the DHS still showed no signs of stopping or slowing down the ICE raids. Senator Alex Padilla tried to ask questions at a DHS press conference and was forcibly removed and handcuffed. They claimed later that they didn't know he was a senator, despite the first words out of his mouth being,
"I'm Senator Alex Padilla. I have questions for the secretary, because the fact of the matter is a half a dozen violent criminals that you're rotating on your
I also want to know how many of our ICE agents have been docked.
On the ground. Hands behind your back. Hands behind your back.
If you don't my hands, go ahead, put them behind my back.
One hand, lay flat, lay flat.
And on June 13th, for the first time in U.S. history, the U.S. Marines detained a U.S. civilian on U.S. soil.
The first time in decades, hundreds of U.S. Marines have been deployed to the streets of Los Angeles.
Footage shows Marines detaining a man outside the Wilshire Federal Building Friday, in the first known case of such interaction, putting zip ties around his wrists and holding him temporarily before handing him over to civilian authorities in accordance with protocol. The man, who identifies himself as 27-year-old Army veteran Marcos Leao, admits he crossed a yellow tape boundary trying to get to the Veterans Affairs Department.
A veteran trying to go to Veteran Affairs. And that brings us to the biggest part so far, June 14th. The No Kings protest. It felt like the entire week had been building to this protest, and a lot of us were scared to go. I was scared to go. I went anyway, and I was determined to document as much as I could, but I was scared. I didn't know what to expect at this point. And when we woke up that morning...
Following breaking news in Minnesota, 2 state lawmakers have been shot.
Authorities believe the shooter was impersonating law enforcement.
Police are searching for the person who shot 2 Minnesota state lawmakers.
My good friend and colleague, Speaker Melissa and her husband Mark, were shot and killed early this morning in what appears to be a politically motivated assassination.
As we got ready to go downtown, earlier in the morning, around 11 a.m., I was scared. And I really hoped it was just me catastrophizing, and that even though the way things ended the last few nights was also bad, and I didn't want that to happen again, I hoped it wouldn't go beyond that. Before I break down the events of June 14th from my perspective, from an on-the-ground protester who was up against the police lines, I want to explain to you why I care so much, why so many people care so much. It's just this idea being pushed by sites like Fox News that it's just a bunch of violent, aggressive, insurrectionist, illegal immigrants who are attacking people without any remorse, and they're burning the cities down, and that is not what's happening. ICE has a quota of 3,000 arrests a day. There is not that many violent illegal immigrants for that to be something that is possible. And because of this, they are taking anyone they can, anywhere.
Who are the people ICE is arresting in these raids, and just how many are violent criminals?
Car wash owner is speaking out after ICE agents raided her business.
New round of ICE arrests in the Bay Area is sparking outrage, with children as young as 3 years old among the families detained in San Francisco.
A 4th grader from Torrance behind bars tonight being held by ICE after going to an immigration hearing with his father.
They had us all surrounded.
Terry Lopez talking to us from her hospital bed after agents released her and sent her home, she says, following this arrest Sunday at Hawthorne and 120th, caught on video.
I had lost my balance because he was kind of like shoving me away from the door. That's when I kind of just like leaned forward because I was kind of trying to protect the stomach.
Let her go, she's pregnant!
Video from neighbors we obtained show them calling for her release. You can hear passerbys honking their horns in protest.
She's a mother of 3, married to an American, and now she's been arrested and is set for deportation without her children.
Her husband says that he doesn't know what to do and is worried that the 3 boys might be deported too without their mom.
They don't have papers, and they had to leave their kids because the kids do. What type of shit is this, yo? And then kids are freaking grabbing teachers and crying on their leg because they don't know if they're about to see their parents when they get home.
Well, tonight, more than 50,000 people are now in immigration detention centers, a number that now includes an honor student from Sarasota County.
Today, U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement announced the arrest of nearly 1,500 undocumented migrants as part of a multi-agency operation in Massachusetts. One of those arrested includes 18-year-old high school student Marcelo Gomes da Silva, who was detained by ICE agents while he was on his way to a volleyball practice on Saturday.
People say, oh, just come here legally and it's not a problem, ignoring the fact that it takes years to become a legal citizen or even just a legal immigrant, and it takes thousands of dollars. People were being detained at their immigration hearings. They would go in, they would check in like they're supposed to in the legal process that they were a part of through legal processes, which Trump has ended, by the way, making a lot of people who became legal here through those means now targeted by ICE. But they would go to their legal court meetings and be detained and dragged out and tackled as soon as they left.
Our other big developing story takes us to what's playing out today in immigration courts all across the country, including here in Dallas. There's a lot of confusion and anger over ICE agents being seen waiting outside of these courthouses and arresting people that are showing up for their scheduled hearings.
Over a dozen people in Chicago are in ICE custody after attending what they thought was a routine immigration check-in.
Just about a week ago, we saw immigration advocates that were at the court actually document what was happening inside these immigration hearings, which was very concerning to them. You know, families who had been used to showing up to these immigration courts and speaking with immigration judges about the status of their cases were then walking out and being detained by ICE.
We captured the moment two men went from migrants to detainees. It happened last week at Dallas Immigration Court.
There was a child's birthday party that was falsely flagged as a gang meetup, which they had no evidence of, where they flashbanged the partygoers and detained multiple people, including 9 children. And that's not even half of it. There was a sweep done at Galaxy Car Wash where they just took people. Some had children in their cars and they just left them there. And for all of the people saying, oh, well, I don't mind a hardworking immigrant, it's interesting that the majority of places that they're finding these people are at their jobs. And when they can't, they go for children at birthday parties. And the people detained are held in deplorable, disgusting conditions.
They have now detained hundreds in some of these recent raids. Where are they being held exactly? Because we also reported that detention centers are over capacity.
That's correct. People are being held in places that normally don't hold people in government custody. We received reports of a family, 2 parents, young parents with a 3-year-old child who were held in an office building for over 2 days and only given Lay's potato chips and milk and animal crackers for their young child. People being held in the areas of detention centers that don't normally house people. We heard from people yesterday that for days one man who was diabetic wasn't given his medication. We heard about another person who went days without their medication, sleeping on the floors of rooms that are usually the day centers for those detention centers. What we are hearing about the conditions that people are being held in, it's not surprising that they have not allowed Congress members in to conduct oversight because the conditions we are hearing about are horrific.
But I was able to talk to some detainees and was concerned with what they told me. Some folks have not had meals for over 14 hours. Some have been pushed into signing papers without a translator, without a lawyer present. We've been told that many of those papers are deportation papers, and then folks have been deported. They are bringing people into the detention and then taking them other places and other states. Also makes it very hard for them to communicate with their family members or with representation. There are parents in there who are separated from their children. There are DACA recipients there. There are asylum seekers there. And when I pressed the ICE agent to verify that all of these folks had criminal records, he could not confirm that.
As ICE agents continue to conduct operations across Southern California, many of those taken into custody have been brought to the ICE processing center in Adelanto, about 60 miles east of Los Angeles. On Tuesday, 5 members of Congress were granted access for the first time.
I came here today to find my constituents. I have a constituent who is deaf and mute. He was picked up by ICE and transported, and we are still looking for him.
We had a discussion with those that were being detained right in the cells who said that they did not have a change of clothes for 10 days.
And through all of this, ICE is doing it with their face covered, their cars unmarked, their clothes plain, because they're scared that somebody's gonna know who they are, that people are gonna figure out who they are, and the reactions are not gonna be positive for them. ICE has reported that they're exhausted and scared, and they should be. The fact that these cowards can bully and detain and beat and gas and pepper spray and shoot people of this city, again, children in some cases, with full impunity, with no repercussions, cowards. Disgusting, tiny cowards. California's trying to pass a law to make it so that they have to have their faces uncovered. And I hope that passes, because I think people need to know exactly who these men are. At the end of the day, I cannot make you feel empathy for humanity, for other human beings. But I can show you the facts, and I can show you what I saw and what I recorded. I have hours of footage at this point, and some of it I'm uploading fully uncut onto YouTube, so you can see all of it if you want. But going into June 14th, going into those protests, well, it was Trump's 79th birthday and his giant dictator-style military parade. I was scared, but I was ready And I was angry. I was angry. And I think a lot of people were. On June 14th, my partner and I made our way to downtown Los Angeles at about 11:30 in the morning. We moved through the city together before finding one of the biggest protests I've ever seen in my life.
Thousands of people have been gathering for the planned No Kings protest in downtown LA, the state of California, and all across the country today. It's in opposition to the Trump administration. The LAPD said it expects tens of thousands of protesters across LA today.
We've seen thousands of people out here today. The crowds were all over downtown Los Angeles.
There have been rallies across the country opposing President Trump's agenda on the day of the president's military parade. Today's events in about 2,000 cities and towns were organized by the No Kings movement, which calls the administration's actions authoritarian.
Absolutely filling the streets of Los Angeles, and there were floats and balloons and music, and people were standing outside their businesses or calling down from their apartments, and it was amazing. After a while, we noticed that it was sort of headed away from City Hall. I think it did end up looping around and coming back, but we decided to break away from the group and head to City Hall where another group was forming. It was at this point that my partner noticed a line of unmarked cars with no license plate, and sitting inside was a ton of ICE agents.
Die! Get the fuck out of here! No one likes you with your shitty. Get out of here, ICE! Fuck you, Why don't you fuck on? Why don't you fuck on? Yeah, keep fucking driving! Keep yourself! Keep driving! No place! No justice! Fuck you all!
The front of City Hall was blocked off. The police presence was overwhelming, but so was the protesters. And it was everybody from every walk of life, from every nationality, from every race. At one point, a giant float drove by with a live band playing, and we danced along while we held our signs, and hundreds of police officers watched us. The front of City Hall was completely blocked off by National Guard. A lot of people were yelling and screaming at them, which is understandable. I took flyers showing that they have rights and options if they don't want to be used against civilians this way, and that there were veterans who had faced this before, and I left those for them. My partner, along with a lot of other people, were reminding them to remember their oath, that they were here to protect us, that this wasn't foreign soil, we weren't a foreign adversary, we weren't attacking the government, that we were people exercising our right to protest. And as people screamed at them, I saw a Marine who looked very young. They all looked very young, trying desperately not to cry. And I think out of all the feds involved, the National Guard and the Marines are the ones that I have the most empathy for.
Is it okay if I get shots of you guys?
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool, thank you. Stay hydrated.
Because a lot of these kids are kids, freshly 18. Some of them look like their helmet was too big for their head. And a lot of them were from these communities. But when you're young and you join the military because recruiters go into these low-income areas and they groom young men as much as they can, and young women, into joining the United States Marines or National Guard. They join so that they have a chance to go to college, to make money, to take care of their family. And a lot of people were saying this is unlawful, it's an unlawful order, so they should be able to refuse that. But I don't think that a lot of these young kids understand that. They don't understand who decides if it's unlawful. They don't understand when it's unlawful, and it's drilled into their head that they're going to be arrested, put in prison if they say no to what's going on. And I think a lot of them did not want to be there. But we stayed in front of the City Hall for a while, and I got a lot of footage, and we talked to a lot of people, and after a while we did have to head back home because we had to feed and walk our dogs. We did that quickly, and then we headed back downtown. And when we got back downtown, the tone shift was palpable. We came back around 3:30 in the afternoon, and there were even more police than there were before. We planned to make our way back down to City Hall, but as we got closer, we saw a large group under a bridge that is part of City Hall, and they were protesting. And I'm gonna show you the video. Nothing is thrown. No one rushes police. Nothing is on fire. But as we try to move down the street to join the other group of protesters at the other end, the Los Angeles Sheriff Department started throwing flashbangs, throwing tear gas, shooting rubber bullets, shooting pepper balls at people. At one point, they even gassed their own officers. And when we moved forward, there was LAPD on the other side of us. Nothing was thrown at them, but the LASD at the end of the street was being very liberal. At one point, we were right next to Matt Gutman, who is a famous reporter from ABC, and he was reporting and getting gassed alongside us, and he said multiple times that he did not understand why we were being attacked with such force, that nothing had happened, that everything had remained peaceful.
So people are now sprinting away. You can see the LAPD is pouring over here. They've actually encircled us, excuse me. Greg, stay right there. You can see them running on the other side. I don't know what they're trying to do, if they're trying to entrap some of the protesters or encircle them. Clearly, they're clearing this. And behind us, you can see, okay, the mounted police are in a truck. There's that man who just got trapped in between them. He looks like there's another man being trampled. We're going to keep moving out of here. Again, that's the first time I've heard someone on a bullhorn. An officer saying, "We need to leave the area." Before that, we have not heard any instructions from law enforcement other than those are more flashbangs going off. Again, non-lethal. They're very forcefully continuing to move people back. We are now right across the street, incidentally, from the LAPD headquarters. And there are now hundreds of officers that we see, Kira. This is one of the largest enforcements that I've seen in the 8 days that this has happened. They've completely commandeered this corner. And behind this massive line, not only of mounted police, officers with launchers, officers with batons, there is a line of vehicles, of police vehicles that include cruisers, and further on we saw armored vehicles with sound cannons and some sort of a barbed wire or movable barricade that's yellow. Again, more officers moving down the street. This is a pretty significant escalation on the part of law enforcement. I have to say that until they moved in, Kira, I personally did not witness any act of violence or projectile thrown at law enforcement.
Even earlier in the day, he had faced an issue with police where he barely brushed up against one of them, or they bumped into him, and the officer lost his mind, claiming that he put his hands on an officer. And it just showed how aggressive and quick to snap and violent the LAPD and LASD and everybody else involved was in these situations.
No, I didn't. You're on TV, and now you're pushing me on live television. All right, we didn't touch anybody. You know that's true. You're okay. Thank you. I got it. So you can see, obviously, tensions are extremely high here.
Yes, because you touched the officer.
No,
don't touch the officer.
We have video testimony. Nobody touched an officer. Okay. Obviously, massively high tensions here.
We tried again and again to move forward, and there were multiple times that my partner, with no mask, no helmet, no protective gear, stood at the front of the line and was gassed repeatedly, and I was scared. But I continued to film because I needed people to see what was happening in the thick of it. Police start pushing us back, including the police horses, which it appears that they have no problem gassing their own horses. I saw multiple bloodied, wounded protesters. One man tried to kick back a can of tear gas towards the LASD, and they shot him point blank in the head with a rubber bullet, and he was covered in blood.
Can I get a shot of your chest?
Of course. They got me pretty good.
They kept pushing us back towards the intersection on the other side, and we moved back. People still protested. Music still played. Cars drove by with flags waving out their window. People were trying to remain positive. At one point, I was near the side of the group, and the next thing I knew, police rushed out and separated me from the main group and my partner.
Oh, fuck.
I decided to try and work my way around the block to try and meet up with my partner again, but every block I went down was blocked off by police. There was somebody getting their car searched. I didn't really get a lot of information on that. I saw arrests. I saw someone be shot with a rubber bullet, and there was so much blood. And later in the same area, there was what looked like a body under an orange tarp, and the police kept referencing the body. And I was trying to figure out what was going on. Multiple people came up to me and said that he had been shot and killed. I cannot find any verifiable sources on this, so I don't know if he lived or died. But a lot of people were gravely injured. At one point, a young boy was shot in the head with a tear gas canister, and he began having a seizure on the sidewalk. There was a moment where I realized that I could get up alongside the police, on the side of one of their blockades along the street in a big parking lot. There was already a couple people there, nobody even protesting, mostly photographers. At most, there was maybe 25, 35 people there, spread out over a huge parking lot. At one point, a woman began pleading with the officers, trying to get them to understand her point of view, and they mocked her. They laughed at her until she was pushed to tears and to anger.
Why that? Throwing rocks and bottles at police is sending the correct message?
I'm sorry?
You think throwing rocks and bottles and bricks at us is a message that...
No, my question is, why did you choose that job?
To protect you.
Protect me from what? Protect me from what? For what?
Two, you guys are kind of little too
Look, I could agree and disagree on that.
We're a little bigger.
Where we could agree and disagree.
I just wanted to make sure that you understood if you wanted to go home, you can go home.
No, I don't want to go home.
All right, have a good day.
Have a good evening.
Sorry.
You guys will forever.
I let him come. You want to go back to Mexico so
Hey, why Mexico though? Why not Guatemala? Why not El Salvador? Why Mexico? Huh?
They're not there.
You see, this is why.
We want to say you grow a little more because...
Why Mexico? Why Mexico?
You're not white.
Hey, right. You see comments like that. Hey, comments like that. You look like an idiot. You look like a fucking idiot. Fucking pendejo. Pinche pendejo. You just look like a fucking idiot. Pinche pendejo.
Way to go, Rich.
I, again, was scared, but I went up to the officer and I tried to ask him, doesn't it bother you? Doesn't it bother you? They're doing this because they're scared. They're scared for their families.
It doesn't, like, get to you at all that these people care so much? It doesn't get to you at all that they care so much?
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, a lot of these people are angry because, like, their families are being
totally
taken.
agree with that. The problem is when they declare no lawful assembly and now we have to do this stuff, we don't want to do this.
You don't want to?
I don't care anything about the immigration debate. I'm just here to make sure that the protests remain peaceful, which they have not been. I have friends that are injured from this week.
I do too.
Right? And I get it. It's a small portion of them, but you've seen it. So you can't deny that it's happening. Right?
Yeah.
So that's all. I don't hold anything against anybody personally.
Thank you.
And then immediately, another officer came over, leaned against the fence, and told me,
Want to get
arrested. Stick around.
Okay, thank you.
No, parking lot. They're trying to...
That was when the police entered the parking lot and started arresting people. I made it down the block and again kept trying to go up farther to meet my partner to try and find him, but again, every single block was filled with police. I ended up in one alleyway where there were two guys who were protesting alone with signs against a line of police. So I put my camera on them and I recorded what happened. The police moved in on us slowly but surely. Keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going. At one point, the police wanted to clear the area and there was a car and a police officer started hitting the car with his stick. Okay.
Keep driving!
And then big convoys of officers started moving through, came down, went down the street, and we got a whole line of police horses. It was at this point that we were well past curfew and things were getting very scary. I was trying to coordinate with my partner and with Dead Domain to try and get in the car and get out, and it was impossible. Police in every street, police on every block. They weren't allowing people to go through. At one point, a man was trying to get past them to get to his car, and he wasn't even a part of what was going on, and they were very aggressive towards him. And as we've seen from other news reports, they don't really care who you are. They will shoot reporters with rubber bullets. They will shoot people on their way home with rubber bullets. They don't care. They put in this curfew and then they push down the streets and they don't let you pass. And if your car or your apartment is past there, SOL, I guess. I was trying very hard to coordinate to figure out where my pickup was. I reassured them that I was okay. It was so fucking hard to get out of the city. But eventually we did. And we drove out. And from what I understand, that night, even more arrests were made. And people online want to sit there and tell us that we deserve this, fuck around and find out, don't be violent. There was no violence that day. Nothing burned, nothing was looted, nothing was ripped down, nothing was thrown, no police officers were attacked, and yet all of us were attacked, whether we were a part of it or not. They didn't care. And at this point, if you are an empathetic human being, if you have a heart, if you care about people, you're probably wondering what you can do. Some people I know can't go out and take rubber bullets, and I get that. But the best we can do now is to make our voices heard as much as possible. We want the ICE raids to stop. We want the National Guard and DHS and the Marines and ICE out of our cities, leaving our people alone. If you can protest, protest. Trump is planning on increasing ICE raids and making it happen even more and attacking more people, and there are more protests planned. And you can often find them in your local area if you go to local subreddits. You can be flooding your local representatives. You can take our demands: ICE out, DHS out, National Guard out, Marines out, raids stopped. Release the people that you have detained. Bring back the people that you've deported overseas. Flood their emails, their phones, write them letters, go in person to their offices, whatever you are capable of doing. Look into providing mutual aid for communities that are affected by this. I made a big drop off to the YMCA downtown where they were helping people whose families were affected by the ICE raids, whether it was people who were terrified to go into work, afraid that they wouldn't come home to their children, or people who part of their family that earns the money is now gone and they don't know where they went, detained or deported. You can look into helping those communities and look into finding ways that you can provide mutual aid for as many people as possible. Look into donating to legal funds if you can. I'm going to make sure to link as many funds and resources as possible in the description of this video that you can check out. Consider offering sanctuary support, giving your home as a place for people to hide if they need it. Think about joining or starting rapid response networks to go and document ICE and where they're at and communicate that to everybody around where they're lurking, because they're trying to be sneaky about it. They want to be sneaky because they know that they're not wanted and that we outnumber them, and that they can't take people if we don't let them. Use your voice. Use your platform if you have it. Educate people on what's going on. Show them what's actually happening, that it isn't some ridiculous violent insurrection where they're burning the city down. Show them what's actually going on. Show them the mother crying in Spanish, talking about the women and 8-month-old baby stolen from the bus stop. Show them Alex Padilla being handcuffed and thrown to the ground. Show them people being drug out of immigration court. Protect your neighbors. Protect your neighborhood. Protect the people, because it's not just about politics. It's about people. Families, children, neighbors who disappear overnight, mothers in cages, fathers taken from the courtroom, and all of it sanctioned and legal, funded by the government. But that doesn't make it right. Laws should be based on morals, not the other way around. And if you feel helpless, you're not alone, but we are not powerless. We are loud, we are many, and we are watching. We're watching the ICE agents. We're watching the backs of our neighbors. And we're not gonna let them do this to us. So speak up, show up, share their names, protest, donate. Because at a time where the same things that happened in Anne Frank's diary are happening in our streets, silence is complicity. And we can't be silent anymore.
I walk in the spirit, I walk in the light. I walk through the darkest hours of night, and I call on my ancestors to my left and my right to walk with me, to walk with me. I walk in the spirit, I walk in the light. Sing that. I said I walk through the darkest hours of night. And I call on my ancestors to my left and my right. To my left and my right. To walk with me, to walk with me. Walk with me, to walk. Singing it again, yeah, yeah. I walk in the spirit, I walk in the light. In the spirit, I walk in the light. I said I walk through the darkest hours of night. I walk in the darkest hours of night. And I call on my ancestors to my left and my right. And I call on my ancestors to my left and my right. And I call on my ancestors to my left and my right. And I call on my ancestors to my left and my right. To walk with me, to walk with me. To walk with me, to walk with me. One more time, I walk in the spirit, I walk in the light. I walk in the spirit, I walk in the light. I said I walk in the service of doing what's right. I walk in the service of doing what's right. And I call on my ancestors to my left and my right. And I call on my ancestors to my left and my right. And I call on my ancestors to my left and my right. And I call on my ancestors to my left and my right. To walk with me, to walk with me. To walk with me, to walk with me. Godspeed. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. I'm gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, marching up to freedom land. Ain't gonna let racism turn me around, turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let racism turn me around. I'm gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, marching up to freedom land.